we're going to realign the money that we're spending with our core national interests. So again, you get back to this, whether it's immigration, foreign policy, reindustrialization, all these things are kind of related to this America First movement, which finally puts the American taxpayer and citizen front and center, and understanding that I think this, what you saw with the rise of globalism was you just had this kind of class of elites that borders didn't matter, where the jobs were didn't matter. You could just have this adventure Wilsonian kind of adventurism around the world with our foreign policy. Really lost contact with the core interests of the country, and it's about restoring that. And so, in some ways, what you don't want to have is, and I think in some ways, the American right was almost sort of a sort of the right wing of an institution that had developed over time that I think we want to um, upend. I mean, I don't think you want to. I think when you have this sort of globalization that it's sort of taken hold in so many institutions in permanent Washington, that's what we're fighting against.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Nick Solheim. I am CEO of American Moment, and it's great to have you back us with another fantastic episode this week. This week, we had on Senator Eric Schmitt from the great state of Missouri, who is a repeat guest. He's such a great senator. We love to have him back on this show. We had a great conversation about the rescissions package, the future of the America First movement in the Senate, reindustrialization, foreign policy, and even told some fun stories about his time golfing with the president and the vice president. So it was a truly fantastic episode. Thanks so much to Senator Schmitt and his team for making this happen, and also for getting a rescissions package through the Senate. That's no small feat. So we will go now to Senator Eric Schmitt. Senator Schmitt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Good to be back.
Yes, it's very, very good to be back. Very good to have you back. It's it's been a year since we've had you on, which is crazy. It feels like that was yesterday, and right before the congressional baseball game last year. We had a different president then.
Yeah, 2 congressional baseball wins since.
Yes,
yeah.
There you go.
And a big win in November.
Yeah, exactly right. So what's been going on since then? The last call it 6 months of the Biden admin, first 6 months of Trump. What have you been up to?
Well, the world has changed a lot, hasn't it? It's been pretty exciting, honestly. Spent a lot of time on the campaign trail with my friend JD Vance and President Trump last fall, and really got around the country trying to help wherever I could, and just honestly kind of witnessing what was happening. I think that when you would go to these arenas in the closing days of the campaign, and we went from Arizona to Milwaukee and Detroit all in one day and back to New York, and you'd see, there's 30,000 people in there, another 50,000 outside waiting to get in, and another, tens of thousands along the street. You could feel something was happening. And President Trump has very uniquely tapped into the hopes and desires of people who feel like this whole thing has left them behind. And so anyway, to be on the front lines of that, to just be as helpful as I could, was a pretty exciting experience. Being down in South Florida on election night was pretty cool. And then, whether it's the transition and helping nominees get across the finish line, he put together a great team, a team of disruptors. I think this non-consecutive term for President Trump has allowed him to put a team together that is really rock solid and wants to execute on this America First agenda. So having those relationships within the administration has been a lot of fun. And then we've got a legislative agenda, of course, that's moving forward: reconciliation, the one big beautiful bill, all the nominees, and then of course now handled the rescissions package. It's been a lot of fun, and I think in a very consequential time for America. I really do believe that these 4 years for President Trump will go down as for the most important years in the history of our country. Because if you think back of where we were, right? think of these are the COVID times. These were the times of mass mandates, of vaccine mandates, of overreaching federal government, of a president that was signing things by auto pen, of all the scandals. All of that stuff was happening, and our country was really in decline. And the American people and all the lawfare, they're trying to throw their chief political opponent, President Trump, in jail. The American people sat in that jury box and they rendered a verdict in November, and they wanted reform. And so here we are with this pretty unique opportunity. So I just try to approach it with a sense of urgency, because you just never know how long these moments last, and we want to maximize it.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I was saying this to somebody earlier today that you think about where we were 10 years ago, in 2015, thinking about how much the Overton window has shifted on so many of these issues, like thinking about the mass popular support we have for mass deportations, as an example,
Right.
now,
Mhm.
that we didn't have even with a lot of the appointees in the first term. We're not in favor of it. It is very exciting times. On your, traveling with the president and the now vice president on the campaign, I've been saying this to a lot of people over the last couple of months that it doesn't seem like there's any senator that's on Air Force One more. Uh, it seems I tell people I'm like, go look at his Twitter feed, man. He's hanging out with him all the time.
We get to play golf, which is fun too.
Yeah, one of the ways that I've kind of been thinking about the Senate these days has been that you have really stepped up as a big leader of, I know it's not an official caucus, but like the America First movement in the Senate, and there are a lot of other great members who are a part of it as well. But I think you've really had a lot of great wins, and I think the message has been absolutely on point. So I want to ask you, what, in your view, is the future of the America First movement in the Senate?
Yeah, I think it's the ascending movement, and not only in the Senate, but really for the country. I think it's a worldview that puts American foreign as it relates to foreign policy, America's interest front and center first, and as it relates domestic policy, puts the American people first. And I think that in many ways, I think it's responsive to where the people are at. And we could talk about it, whether it's trade or economic policy or foreign policy. I think it's very much rooted in what's good for the American people. I think if you really wanted to historically kind of look at it, during the Cold War, we were united in defeating Soviet communism, and that meant, from a military perspective, we wanted the European allies to get back on their feet. NATO's created. We allowed them to get on their feet, and we had some really unfair trade deals also along the way. But when the Cold War ended, we never really adjusted. And so I think what you're seeing now is President Trump has brought this movement to the forefront of American politics, which is to say, we're a nation with an economy, not the other way around. We have a foreign policy where the primary motivation is what is good for the United States of America. This kind of globalist view where everybody's a world citizen, borders don't matter, we're all just consumers. Everything is related to sort of pie charts and numbers. That hasn't really worked out very well for real people. People where I'm from, I grew up in a really blue collar area in Missouri. And I think you saw working class folks, the folks I grew up around, their jobs, they kind of got hit with this double whammy. Their jobs were shipped overseas. And then you brought in through mass migration people from somewhere else to undercut their wages. And by the way, their sons and daughters were sent off to foreign conflicts in these forever wars. And people, so I think what you're seeing right now is a sort of a course correction for our country where we put, again, America's interest first. And so I think you're seeing that play out. I think that, again, President Trump has done an incredible job of articulating this. JD Vance has done an incredible job of putting meat on the bones too, and making the case across the country of how this works for real people. So I'm just excited. I think this is sort of the leading edge ideology, and I think it's going to continue to gain more and more support, not only in the Senate but nationwide. Because if you take the time to listen to real people, if you get outside of this Washington D.C. bubble where permanent Washington is afraid of any kind of change, they want that level of disruption. They want reform in these institutions that in many ways have been aimed against them. Look at the Department of Justice. It was aimed against Catholics and parents who show up to school board meetings. The EPA has made it hell for farmers to go do what they do best. So when President Trump puts this team in place and is talking about internal reform, that's an important aspect of it. And then what we do legislatively. I also think this kind of beginning with Woodrow Wilson, this kind of rise of the administrative state and this managerial class has been a complete sellout of the American people. These elites are kind of everywhere, but they're from nowhere. They're much more comfortable in Davos than they are in my hometown of Bridgeton.
Right.
And I think that that is what this is about. That's what this fight is all about for the right, is to kind of take that on and fight for real people. And that's what's exciting about being, at this moment in American politics.
Yeah, something that really comes through when you talk about it and through a lot of the things that I see you talk about in clips on X or whatever is how much you care about the American worker. And I know there are a lot of other senators who share the same view, Senator Hawley, Senator Banks, to name a few. Um, what do you think it is reasonably, that we can actually do to better support, the American worker in the next 3.5 years?
Well, I think we can't continue to have policies that encourage companies actually to move their jobs overseas. I think we need to have a real debate and be focused on the reindustrialization of America. The fact is, there's twice as many people that work in government now than are in manufacturing, and that is a consequence of terrible policy that's been pushed by sort of career level bureaucrats and a Democrat Party that has abandoned working people. I mean, you got to remember when I was growing up, and I'm a Gen Xer, right? The Democrats felt like they had the high ground with working people, and they could cast Republicans as only caring about corporate America and the wealthy. That's just not true anymore.
Yeah.
I think from an economic perspective, certainly from a cultural perspective, you just look at a lot of these debates. The Democrats have totally lost their minds, and nothing could be more clear than the immigration issue. I mean, they completely opened up our border to 20 million people, unvetted in most cases, and they're perfectly fine with it. Like they actually, the left wing radicals that were writing white papers a decade ago somehow found their way into the Oval Office with a president who was out to lunch, effectively, or either that or was totally bought into this for legacy purposes. But no matter, you saw people stream in across the border with crime, with fentanyl. It affected communities. Communities were overrun with those problems. And when President Trump started talking about this immigration issue a decade ago, talk about the Overton window,
Yeah.
he changed the debate and he made the issue about sovereignty, about really a fight for our civilization, for a country. This is a country that's founded on really important ideas, but we're a nation and we're a people, and we're not some, airport with, or a strip mall with an airport attached to it, right? Like this isn't just some economic zone. It's our home.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that frame of mind, the fight seems much more relevant and important. I just think about it where I grew up. Like my dad worked 7 days a week in the midnight shift. The guys that I grew up around playing baseball, their dads were factory workers, or they drove a truck, or they were cops, or they were firefighters. Really, the backbone of our communities. And I think if Republicans keep that in mind, that's who we're fighting for. We're gonna, it's good policy, but we're also going to keep winning and expanding this new coalition that President Trump sort of put together in the last election that allowed him to win the popular vote and sweep the battleground states. So again, I'm bullish on sort of where we're headed here, but you've got to have the courage, I think, to stand up and fight in the arena, because I'll tell you, one of the takeaways for me is, as it relates to foreign policy in particular, the neoliberals and the neoconservatives don't really disagree on a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it's what are the core national interests of the country? Pursue diplomacy first. If we have to engage, we should have a restrained foreign policy. But if we have to engage, it's with overwhelming force. And I think that's President Trump's stamp on foreign policy. We could talk more about it, but we've already seen recent examples where that's been very effective. And also, I think him being a strong president has created this ability for him to rebalance trade.
Yeah.
We've been ripped off for a long time, and I think these trade deals now are a part and parcel of a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I was at this on the trade issue. I was at this reindustrialized conference 2 weeks ago. It was very exciting
Yeah.
being, with a lot of these people who are very motivated in many cases to put millions and billions of dollars on the line to actually build things here in the United States, provide jobs, etc. What are you most excited about? I think it's pretty obvious that manufacturing in the modern day and age is not going to be the same
Right.
as it was 50 to 70 years ago. What excites you the most
Well,
about?
I think you look around, half our cars are built overseas. 80% of our pharmaceuticals are made overseas. 90% of our chips, high-end chips, are made overseas. It doesn't need to be that way. And I think we're at a time where we can question a lot of the assumptions that people have taken for granted. You don't need to have all these jobs go somewhere else. We can do the work here. And I think actually is in the advances in technology and sort of advanced manufacturing are going to make that more real and provide opportunities for real Americans to onshore those kind of jobs. And look, again, these trade deals were put in place decades ago. I can't actually believe it's taken this long for a president to take this on, but let's just take the last 30 years. We've been saddled with these deals that we've been ripped off. We don't have access to markets. We pay tariffs, or there are barriers in place that send our goods back or our products back. But President Trump has said we're not doing that anymore. And so, on Liberation Day, he makes this announcement, and he's methodically now gone through, whether it's with the EU or other countries, and said, we're going to have a renegotiation of this. And the American people are going to benefit from it. So, all these people who thought this was totally taboo, and the experts have gotten this wrong 1,000 times already. So, not only do we have more access to markets, and not only do we have fair trade deals, but also look at the investment that's happening. I mean, trillions of dollars. Mercedes-Benz wants to build their stuff here. NVIDIA wants to build their stuff here. I mean, all this manufacturing, because they made the decision like, you know what? It's actually a better deal for us to manufacture in the United States of America. And oh, by the way, we have 40% of all the consumers in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, all the consumer spending is here. So we've never had a president that's used that kind of leverage that's gone to say, oh, you want to have your products be able to sold to 40% of all the consumer spending that exists in the world? Well, guess what? We need to be treated fairly in your markets. I don't know. I don't really understand how that hasn't happened before, but President Trump is a different animal, and he's the sort of the singular political figure right now. But before he stepped onto that stage a decade ago, no one, there just wasn't a lot of discussion. So for me, I feel very much at home in this Republican Party. I joked at last year's convention that you had Hulk Hogan, Kid Rock, and normal people on the stage. This is my kind of party. And Hulk Hogan, of course, just passed away. But I think being a party of common sense and of normal people is a good thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's totally emblematic of who the president is. And by the way, the fact that he has proved all these like highly trained and educated economists, totally wrong.
Well, it speaks to, and I think this is important when you talk about experts, all these people. If you think about, if you zoom out here, for 100 years, we've been on this collision course that's finally happening. You had literally Woodrow Wilson, probably our worst president, who wasn't much good at anything growing up except creating systems and trying to control them, kind of set up this administrative state because he didn't actually think that people could get it right. He thought the Constitution didn't address the challenges of their time. And FDR then kind of supercharges it, right? So you have these massive agencies with people who aren't accountable to anybody, making up a bunch of rules and enforcing without Congress ever authorizing it, right? And so you have the rise of this kind of expert class. And now you have a president and an administration that says, you know what, where the power really resides? It doesn't reside with you, it resides with the people. So there's this huge disruption that's happening, and you couldn't, stage it any better or make the lines more clear than with USAID.
Yeah.
Here are people who, these aren't American interests. The Institute for Peace, it's got a great sounding name, but that's how you get to a place where you have sex change operations being paid for in Guatemala by U.S. taxpayers. It's how you end up with Iraqi Sesame Street. It's how you end up with DEI trainings in Burma. This stuff nobody ever voted on. People despise that kind of waste of their taxpayer dollars. And we've got to rein that in. But the only way you're going to do it is if you've got the guts to stand up and say, we're not doing this anymore. And the Democrats are losing their minds because you have this strange nexus between USAID, their NGOs, that were doing all the stuff that the American people would never support. But it's what happens when you have this wandering foreign policy that has now existed for decades, this kind of Wilsonian utopian view that we can be everywhere at once all the time, and abuse of what soft power is supposed to be. And they were doing it so forever. And, when we were doing the rescissions package that I handled on the Senate floor, this was the first time we could kind of confront this. And we said, you know what? We're not going to spend $1 billion on Corporation for Public Broadcasting anymore. They're not a neutral arbiter of news. They're a partisan left-wing group that looks down on middle America. And if they want to survive on their own, God bless you, but you're not going to do it with taxpayer dollars anymore. And most of that, the remaining $8 billion in that rescissions package was sort of realigning our priorities within, what we do, what this relates to the State Department and what USAID had gone adrift for. So I'm really proud of that. I think it's just one step of saying we're going to actually take steps to correct this. We're not going to continue to go down this path anymore.
Yeah. I think you're totally right about that, and that the people are with the president on it. That being said, I think it is pretty obvious that there are a fair amount of Republican senators who are sort of ideologically opposed to the idea of tariffs. What is the general basis of their argument, behind the scenes, why they would not support something like this?
Well, I think this has just been sort of accepted dogma for so long
Oh.
that it's finally being challenged. I think at the heart of it, what President Trump is doing is using leverage that we have so that we stop getting ripped off by other countries. I think, the 10% that's out there is sort of like a kind of a Sam's Club membership fee. If you want to have access to the 40% of all the consumer spending in the world,
Yeah.
there you are. And the revenue that it's raised so far is in the hundreds of billions of dollars so far.
Yeah.
Right. And that's projected. I mean, that is going to be trillions and trillions of dollars of revenue in the 10-year window. And you've not seen inflationary impacts there. You also, by the way, didn't see it in his first term when everybody else said this was, this is heresy. He was able to do it. We got a better deal with China than we had before. But the Chinese have openly admitted when then Joe Biden came in, they just didn't follow the rules because they didn't think Joe Biden was going to do anything about it. I think that's very different here with this president. So on a foreign policy front, you finally have, sort of the school that I'm in, sort of American realism. You have a president who that's how he operates. It is what's in our interest, maximum leverage. He's got the respect of people around the world. Look at all these peace deals that are coming to the table that would have never come to the table with Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden. They didn't respect America in that way. And so basically through peace, through strength and deterrence and understanding what America's real power is, but being restrained in doing it. Iran is a great example of this, right? Like there were a lot of people in this town that wanted further engagement in that region.
Oh, yeah.
President Trump and JD Vance, that whole team showed a lot of restraint here by saying, we have a core national interest in that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, overwhelming force to obliterate their capabilities, and then pivot to peace.
Yeah.
Not sending our boys and girls over there for an extended conflict or regime change or some idealistic view. You treat the world as it is, and you try to protect your interests. But if you believe in scarcity and you don't think we can be everywhere all at once all the time, like this is the way.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really instructive, and not just with how he handled that situation, but others we can talk about. But it's for me, this is sort of, he's putting the case in front of the American people now. This is a different way of doing things than we're used to.
Yeah. Yeah, we had on Michael Stumo from the Office of Management and Budget a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about that 10% universal baseline. And one of the things that he said on that podcast was we're already approaching the level where we are bringing in more revenue that way than the corporate tax does.
Yeah.
And I told him after we were done recording, so this is new information, but I said, you should just start sending that to the Republican conference every week. Like,
yeah.
How much money you're bringing in, I bet that would sell a lot of people pretty fast. But one of the things that I just want to say, in response to that answer is, I love this about the way that you talk, the way the vice president talks, the way that the president talks, is you just covered all three of those issues and made them so intertwined: trade, immigration, and foreign policy. And it is so obvious, like, how authentic you are about this and that you truly believe it. And so I just want to thank you for that. So you've brought up the rescissions package a couple times. We have a lot of people in our network that listen to the show who maybe have not worked on the Hill before.
What the hell is a rescissions?
Exactly.
What is a rescission?
Yes.
Let alone mini rescissions.
Yes. Please give us rescissions for dummies.
Yeah. So basically in the 1970s, legislation was passed that provided. I mean, this was kind of in response, and you can argue about the constitutionality of all this, but Nixon, President Nixon, had done a number of impoundments, and there was a movement to sort of address that. And what we're left with, the practical implication is that the president now can, within in a 45-day window, send a package of rescissions, meaning already authorized and appropriated dollars, to be rescinded, right? To basically say we're actually not going to go spend that money because it doesn't align with priorities of the administration. Now, some of the critics say, well, this is taking away from Article 1 powers. It's just not that part of it. The argument's not true, because Congress has a role to play, as we just saw through the rescissions package, meaning it had to get through both chambers, the House and the Senate, for the rescissions package ultimately to go into effect. So the $9 billion in this rescissions, $1.1 billion was for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, think NPR, think PBS, and then the remaining, basically $8 billion, was on all this crazy stuff from the foreign policy establishment that they wanted to spend around the world, that we rescinded back. And I think, in addition to the fact that we proved we could do it, it's really just, it's not happened like we did it. The last time it really happened was in the 90s. There were some bipartisan rescissions that happened, but we're dealing with a very different Democrat Party at this point. And so for me, it was interesting. We're on the floor for 16 or 17 hours, and you're handling all the amendments and working with your colleagues and making sure this got done. I think part of it was to show that we have the political will to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to see us stymied at that point, because we'd have so many wins, with his team, reconciliation, now rescissions, you got the trade deals. I mean, there's a lot of momentum. And I think having the runway for all this stuff to play out in a positive way for the midterms and beyond is really important, because American people are going to be watching all this and see how it affects them. And we got to keep that front of mind. But yeah, I think it was important to get done. It's something that we should probably do more of them. But I think it also showed our ability to course correct, to listen to people, and when they see this kind of ridiculous spending, that we're actually going to go do something about it.
Yeah. I heard there was some Republican opposition behind the scenes to doing a rescission package. Without naming any names, like what's the basic, version of, why they were opposed to it?
Well, the typical appropriations process takes 60 votes, because you've got to overcome the legislative filibuster. So in through that process, there's Democrats that vote for appropriations bills. So when you come back and, especially from the appropriators, they don't like the fact that you're kind of coming back on something that was already agreed to. But the truth is, look, when you see the kind of abuse that we saw, when you see this reckless spending around the world from USAID and others and the Institute for Peace, we should do something about it. And that's, to me, what it was all about. And we ought to have the ability to sort of course correct. And the truth is, that stuff's not line itemed in the budget somewhere. There's no line item for Iraqi Sesame Street. There's no line item for Guatemalan sex changes. But when that's what happens, which is what happened in the previous administration, we ought to claw the money back.
Yeah.
I think it's a basic kind of accountability tool. And also, I think, a signal to the American people that we want to be, serious about, being fiscally responsible with their tax dollars. So there's a lot of reasons to do it. There were some objections to it, but we were able to get it done. But again, sadly, I think we're now dealing with a Democrat Party that has just totally lost their way. They're competing to be the chief resistor. It's all performative stuff. They don't have a leader. They don't have a message. They don't have an issue set. They're mad that, Sydney Sweeney is doing American Eagle commercials. They're mad that
they've really got their priorities.
They're mad that they're mad that MS-13 members are being sent back to their home countries. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't think they've hit rock bottom yet. I think they still have a couple election cycles to go, because they're still obsessed with this kind of woke ideology, and they have Trump derangement syndrome and all those sorts of things. But having said that, I think we focus on what have we really delivered on? Well, I think sometimes when you deal with tax cuts, it can be a lot of numbers. But what was so, I think, smart by President Trump, he talked about it on the campaign trail. None of this stuff is a surprise. No tax on tips. That helps real people.
Yeah.
Like, for people who work in the hospitality industry, that's a huge deal. My daughter, who works at a snow cone stand, understands what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
No tax on overtime. Allowing people who are working their tail off, like my dad did, 7 days a week, midnight shift, to keep more of their own money. like that resonates with real people. And I think those kind of policies had the first ever school choice provision, as far as tax credits for, if you want to send your kid to a private or religious school, there's now a federal place to go do that. I think that's important. And I just think there were a lot of things that we did that are going to matter to real people, to farmers, ranchers, small business owners, and we'll talk about. I mean, the Democrats have their familiar lines that but I just think they've lost all credibility with like working people. So I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to hold water.
Well, the most infuriating thing to me about all of that is they have been so. I mean, I've seen so many clips in the last couple of weeks where they just say, "Oh yeah, that stuff doesn't matter."
Right.
Right? It's
Well, think
like,
about this. Think
that's
about this.
insane.
Think about this. Here's what they voted for. They voted for the largest tax increase in American history. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that the American family gets to keep of their own money. They wanted all those tax cuts to expire. So they voted for the largest tax increase in American history. They also voted for, free healthcare for illegal immigrants, all of the benefits that they were receiving. The reform here is we made sure you're not going to get Medicaid if you're an illegal immigrant.
Mm.
So a lot of those kinds of reforms that were baked in here, they voted against all that stuff. So I mean, they can talk about what they want, but it's just like I said, I just think it rings hollow. They don't have a messenger. They're just doing a bunch of goofy stuff that I think it's why their approval numbers are the worst they've been in 40 years.
Yeah. And excuse me, I should have asked this earlier. What was the breakdown of the the part of the rescissions package that was foreign policy?
Yeah,
Focused?
about 8 billion.
Okay.
So 1.1, there are basically two buckets here. 1.1 billion was for NPR, PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the remaining was on the foreign affairs stuff related to the State Department,
Okay.
USAID, all that kind of stuff. So
Got it.
the bulk of it was that, and I think it was important to we're going to realign the money that we're spending with our core national interests. So again, you get back to this, whether it's immigration, foreign policy, reindustrialization, all these things are kind of related to this America First movement, which finally puts the American taxpayer and citizen front and center, and understanding that I think this, what you saw with the rise of globalism was you just had this kind of class of elites that borders didn't matter, where the jobs were didn't matter. You could just have this adventure Wilsonian kind of adventurism around the world with our foreign policy. Really lost contact with the core interests of the country, and it's about restoring that. And so, in some ways, what you don't want to have is, and I think in some ways, the American right was almost sort of sort of the right wing of an institution that had developed over time that I think we want to um, upend. I mean, I don't think you want to. I think when you have this sort of globalization that it's sort of taken hold in so many institutions in permanent Washington, that's what we're fighting against. And I think that again, all these things that we're doing are a part of that mission.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun time.
Yeah. I've heard some rumblings about a rescissions package 2.0. What do you say?
We'll see. I mean, I would support it. I think right now, we're in this try to get to regular order on normal appropriations bills. I certainly support that. We'll see if we can do it. I think that the runway's a little shorter here before September 30th. The Democrats are going to continue to obstruct. Once we get, I think, into FY fiscal year 26, which is after September 30th, there's more probably time to do that. But we should be doing as much as we can right now, I think, to demonstrate we can go do it. But I think rescissions should be more a part of what we do.
Yeah.
I think,
Certainly good strategy.
I agree. And I think the combination of reconciliation and rescission here was a nice 1-2 punch to deliver on not only President Trump's campaign promises, but what the American people want. And
Yeah.
so more of that.
Yeah. What do you think, generally speaking, are the biggest areas of opportunity there, where there is this sort of, I guess, fraud, waste, and abuse is
Yeah.
what they call it?
Well, I think, there's a couple things. There's actually on the regulatory side, which isn't, I'll answer your question, but like there's just a lot of like duplicative and unnecessary regulations that are on the books that I think DOJ was through some advancements in technology can identify better, and we ought to get rid of that stuff. I kind of did the post. I led the post Chevron working group, which is kind of identify ways that we can, dismantle the administrative state, make legislation more prescriptive. All this stuff is pulling in the same direction, which is to take power away from those who never should have had it in the first place, who aren't accountable to anybody, these unelected bureaucrats, and putting it back into people who are accountable. If you're from Missouri, you can send me here, you can send me home, you can send me back. There's a level of accountability there. Same with the president. But I think, if there was probably the next crack, there's a lot there. I think with the Department of Education, there's probably and by the way, still probably a vestige, which I know they're trying to uproot. I mean, when I was Attorney General of Missouri, we were fighting back against, they were making, education grants, dependent on whether or not you had, critical race theory as part of what you were doing on training. So I think they've, rooted that out. But that's a whole nother thing. I mean, I'm on the, lead the Constitution Subcommittee on the Judiciary Committee. We had Harmeet Dillon, in before.
Patriot.
Yeah, she's great,
Love
leading
her.
the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. And we wanted to find out, what are your priorities? And she's absolutely committed to rooting out DEI. It's
Oh, yeah.
racially discriminatory. It basically has preferred groups and non-preferred groups, and it's based on skin color. That's illegal in this country. And now she's going after it, whether it's universities. I think there's probably going to be a couple high-profile cases in corporate America where they're trying to put this DEI underground and call it something else.
Yeah.
And
Needs a different acronym.
right, it needs something else, right? But I think this is all really important because, like I said, I think people saw this play out over 4 years and they couldn't believe what was happening to their country. And so he's got a team in place that's going to go make the necessary changes.
Yeah. I should have prefaced asking that question with I was over at a GSA earlier today.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I was having a conversation with a senior appointee over there, and it was like, wow, there is still
Yeah.
so much. There is still so much to do. He was even telling me about like the fact that they still have like solar panels on the roof. They put like 5 solar panels up there, and because it doesn't give the building enough power, it's like 80 degrees inside. It was like sweating like crazy. So it's very amusing. There's still a lot
Pete
of
Buttigieg is spending $80 billion on DEI, and yet he did want to upgrade the air traffic control system. We weren't laying broadband because they didn't have climate action plans. We weren't building chips factories because they hadn't hired enough ex-convicts to meet their DEI requirements in Arizona. This is no bull. This is actually what was going on.
Yeah.
So I think they're taking all this on, and
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think another thing that's really important that, hopefully the Senate will have time to prioritize now is nominees.
Yeah.
The president and Sergio Gore, who runs the presidential personnel office, they've put a lot of time into picking these nominees. I think some people are of the opinion that the Senate is not moving quickly enough. What is going on there?
Yeah, I think it's a hot topic right now, and it should be. President deserves to have his team in place. What we're witnessing right now is an unprecedented level of obstruction by Chuck Schumer, the Democrats, historically. And in fact, if you want to take a step back historically beyond that, prior to Chuck Schumer really becoming a force in the Senate, on the executive, so you have 3 calendars. You have the legislative calendar, you have the executive calendar, which is all the appointments, and you have the impeachment calendar. So you're moving between one of those 3 calendars in the U.S. Senate. So when we go to the executive calendar, this was never a thing. Think about this. Clarence Thomas, in a very controversial vote to be a United States Supreme Court justice on the executive calendar, cloture, a filibuster was never invoked. Any one senator can go do that. It didn't happen. He passed with 52 votes. Didn't need 60 because there was no cloture. So the executive calendar had never really operated with the filibuster. It was reserved for the legislative calendar. Okay. So Chuck Schumer is the one that made this a thing, that you would actually filibuster nominees to the executive branch. And now it's just reached an epic level. They have done it on every single nominee now. It's never happened like this before. So I think Chuck Schumer is entering the find out stage of all of this. And I think our conference is committed, whether it's recess appointments, that should be on the table. You could basically, to deal with this abuse The Senate went from a after cloture 30 hours before you could vote to after cloture 2 hours before you could vote. There's nothing to say that we can't say after cloture if this is the game you're gonna play every 15 minutes after cloture expires.
Yeah.
So the point is, I think when you see this level of obstruction, it requires a response. And I think our conference is very committed to making sure President Trump has his team in place. So we're moving in that direction. And because this is just, it's not normal. Even with the level of obstruction we saw in President Trump's first term,
Mhm.
this isn't normal. And
Yeah.
I think we've got to deal with that.
Yeah. Um, Again, I don't want to create any difficulties for your relationships in the Senate, but there have been some individual Republican senators who I won't name who have opposed certain nominees in the past, and I just want to ask you, what your message would be to people, members of the Senate, who might be concerned about some of the president's nominees.
I think I start with the proposition that president is the only person that's elected by the entire country. It isn't to say that every single person that every single president would nominate is, should be confirmed. But this president, President Trump, has put together a stellar team. People who've walked away from really important positions in the private sector have wanted to come in, or qualified people that have had some experience before. And we batted 1,000 on the cabinet positions, which was important. That was an important test.
That was a huge win.
It was,
You
and
guys deserve a lot of credit.
yeah, and then you get to kind of like with those undersecretaries. Like I think procurement reform at the Department of Defense is really important, and
Mhm.
President Trump put some great people in there. Mr. Feinberg, Bridge is great over the Department of Defense. I'm a fierce defender of his worldview, and but we got all those people through, and there was time when those were somewhat controversial, I guess, to
Yep.
some people.
And they're both great men.
Right, they're great, and they're going to do a great job, and I think reorient our spending and our focus on defense to the Indo-Pacific, which is where it should be. Um, but now we're entering like ambassadorships and judges, and there's just no time to spare. And so I think everybody should do the review. That's the right of every senator, but the president deserves to kind of have his team in place, and the people that he's nominating are really well qualified. So and just like with rescissions, I'm willing to sit down and work with anybody and try to make the case. And I think president's going to be successful in that front. I think the Senate's going to be successful in front. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to end on a positive note, I'm kind of throwing you a curveball here, but any fun or funny stories about the president or the vice president while you were on the campaign trail or since they've been in office? Anything fun they wouldn't be too embarrassed by?
Well,
You can share your golf scores.
Yeah, well, we played, which was very, I guess, publicized when we were getting ready to do reconciliation. We're getting to the votes, and Rand Paul was Lindsey Graham and myself, and Rand Paul and President played.
Wow, that is a
Yeah,
very
how about
interesting
that?
group.
And Ratliff too, CIA director.
Wow.
He was a good golfer.
I can't picture Senator Paul, who I've met once or twice, delightful man. I can't picture him playing golf.
He's not bad. He's not bad. And he can swing the club. And so we were playing, and the president's just like legit. People ask me this. He's a very good golfer. Like every drive is down the middle. His short game is really good. Like he chips and putts. So we had a lot of fun that day. I played pretty well that day. And then the next day, and I was hanging out with Vice President. We played the next day. I didn't play quite as well that day, and I was just honest with JD. I said, I'm glad I played better yesterday.
Yeah.
than I wouldn't want to have it reversed where I didn't play well with the president and played great playing with you, but we had a lot of fun, and he's
So did he do better than you?
who?
The VP?
I wouldn't say that. But JD's a good golfer. JD's
great.
JD's a good golfer, and we had a blast. And it was just fun to be out there and kind of we came in as freshmen together. He's a great guy. And I tell people, like, when he was doing that debate, he just showed everybody who I already knew who he was.
Yeah.
And I talked to him beforehand. I'm just like, you got a longer format here. This is perfect for you. Just be yourself. And his personality came through. His policy positions came through. His authenticity came through. And he's just he's a regular guy that cares about the country, and he's just doing a great job as vice president. He really is, and I'm just proud to know him. He's doing great, and President Trump, I will just say, spending that time on Air Force One with him, or Trump Force One in the campaign trail, what strikes you is his deep love for the country. Like, it's genuine, and I think what people want more now than anything is they just want authenticity and authentic leadership. And that's who President Trump is, and he cares about the country. His energy, it's just unbelievable. I mean, literally, I referenced this. This is in the closing weekend of the campaign. I met him down in Arizona. We flew from Arizona. He had something there that night. Next morning, we go to Detroit, and he visits neighborhoods and restaurants and does a rally. And we get on the plane and go to Milwaukee and do the same thing. And then we're flying to New York. It's like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And his energy, he's talking about the issues. He's interested in what people have to say. RFK Jr. was on that swing, and you're just having these really interesting conversations. And he's a really great leader. And I think he's going to go down as one of the most consequential presidents in our country's history. So I just feel, unique. I feel like I'm just, this guy grew up in a working class neighborhood, and here I am and get to do this stuff. I just feel so grateful and so blessed to be a part of what's happening right now in this country. And, between President Trump and Vice President Vance, we've got 2 great people up there who are doing some great stuff. So,
yeah. And we're very glad to have you in the Senate. Senator, thank you so much for coming again on Moment of Truth.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us for another fantastic episode of Moment of Truth. And thanks again to Senator Schmitt and his team for making the time to come down here to us little people and explain what's going on in the Senate. He's truly a great friend, a great senator. We were super glad to have him. We'll be back with another fantastic guest next week, so make sure to tune in then. Thank you very much for joining us on Moment of Truth, and we will see you on Monday. Moment of Truth is an American Moment podcast taped at the Conservative Partnership Campus Studios and is produced by Jake Mercier and Hunter Smith, with original graphics and title cards by Jared Cummings. Our intro song is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich, and our website is AmericanMoment.org.